Hello everyone, this is Pete Gillies, former chief pilot of Western Helicopters at Rialto. Worked for them for 41 years in the terrain behind me, as you can see, the mountains and all. I've been encouraged to report an engine failure that occurred when I was flying our beautiful, highly sought Bell 206L-1 Long Ranger, the queen of our fleet as far as passenger transport was concerned. And this event happened a few years ago. I didn't keep a logbook. I haven't kept a logbook for decades. I would have to look through hundreds of flight logs to find out when this happened. But it happened at a time when some Long Rangers had a defective component or two in the fuel system, and ours was one of them. This component, if it failed in flight, resulted in an engine failure that had characteristics that normally you never have, and I'd like to describe the flight for you. It was on a beautiful day. It was a flight to transport 3 passengers over a terrain near Ontario Airport to select a future site for a shopping center. It was a routine, middle of the morning, beautiful weather. The Long Ranger was requested, 3 in the back, all looking out at various bits of real estate. Me up front, just talking to Ontario Tower and just maneuvering around. Nothing special at all. Beautiful aircraft, smooth as glass, and preferred by those customers of ours who really appreciated the size, the room, the quality, and the low noise level, and the lack of 1 per rev that is normally a part of all 2 per rev, 2-blade rotor systems. So this was just a routine, quiet, normal flight, perfect weather, aircraft perfect, everything was fine. Completed the flight after an hour of looking at real estate, dropped them back off at Ontario Airport, FBO, requested from the tower to cross both active runways northbound. I wanted to take a quick run up to Mount Baldy Road, where the next day I would be lifting a wrecked car out of the canyon with our Huey, with our UH-1. I had not seen the wreckage area. I wanted to know if I could land there and all. So I just proceeded. I'm all alone in the aircraft. Again, the conditions are beautiful. It's between 10 and 11 in the morning. There's no wind. It's just you almost feel guilty flying such a beautiful aircraft in those conditions. Found the wrecked car in Baldy Canyon. Noted that I could land there tomorrow, the scheduled lift day with our big aircraft, and then proceeded back to Western, which was east, I'm making a wild guess here, east of my location by probably 10 miles or so. I'm proceeding straight east over the highway below me there, which was a 2-lane traffic highway. Routine. I don't remember my altitude above ground, but it was a completely normal, safe flight in every respect. So I decided to let the autopilot do its job. I turned the autopilot on, and it flew the Long Ranger better than I could fly it under any circumstances. I was so impressed. The sun is at about the 10 o'clock position as I'm proceeding eastbound. Conditions are perfect. Everything is normal. The ship is glassy smooth. And I'm sitting there with basically my arms folded. I'm not on the flight controls. The autopilot has complete control of the aircraft. Pitch, roll, and yaw, 3 axis. And I remember thinking to myself more than once, this is awesome. I can't believe this beautiful aircraft. And glass is smooth, everything's fine. So I'm totally relaxed. I still have a couple of miles to go to cross Interstate 15 ahead. And I'm high enough. I've got congestion, rural congestion on both sides of the road below me. Ranches, houses, eucalyptus trees. Just every square foot of ground on both sides of my flight path is congested. The road itself has many cars going in both directions. There's no room to land. If you wanted to on the road, you'd be involved in an auto accident instantly. So, hey, everything's fine. And the Long Ranger that I was flying was certified for single pilot IFR. So it not only had a beautifully equipped panel, but the electrical system had been split. Half of the system was circuit breakers in the normal location overhead. The other half was circuit breakers in the console. So I'm just flying along and I'm deciding to pull this breaker and that breaker. And at that point, experience of my first day at Western Rialto came to light. The first time I walked into the hangar as an employee of Western, the hangar door, north hangar door at Rialto Airport was open. Almost through the open door was a Jet Ranger sitting on its skids. Under the Jet Ranger was a mechanic on a rollaway. He was half soaked with jet fuel. And I hadn't, this is my first day on the job. I walked in, saw him right there, and stopped, introduced myself. Of course, he didn't have to explain that that was jet fuel he was soaked in. The hangar floor under his creeper was all wet. Everywhere except outside where I was standing was covered with jet fuel. And I, of course, said, gee, what's going on? What's happening? And he says, well, this is a customer aircraft, and one of the two boost pumps has failed, and this is the mess we have to deal with every time we have to change a boost pump. There's no way to drain all the fuel out of the tank, and so when we loosen the boost pump, fuel pours out, even though the gauge says empty and we've suctioned everything we could, there's still fuel in the bottom of the tank. So it comes out, and you're underneath it, gravity takes over, you get covered with fuel if you're dumb enough to be right there in the wrong place, but it's all over the floor, and by the time you have removed the defective pump and put in a new one, you're soaked. And my wife, he said, hates it when I come home smelling like Jet A. He said, we don't have any Jet Rangers here at Western right now, but the company is probably going to get one. Do me a favor. He said, I happen to know that in flying the Jet Ranger, the use of one or both boost pumps is required above 6,000 feet pressure altitude. But below that, you don't need the boost pumps. The boost pumps are there to assist the engine pump up on top in lifting fuel from the fuel tank. And below 6,000, you don't need them. Well, the elevation here is 1,600 feet above sea level. So he said, I have a favor to ask of you that all of our mechanics would appreciate. Well, you're just flying around the pattern, giving training or whatever, and you're not at 6,000 or above. Would you do us a favor and just don't turn the boost pumps on? Because the aircraft doesn't need them at the low pressure altitudes, and it just wears them out. And so I said, okay, fine, thank you. I'll try and remember that. So several years later, we have our Jet Ranger, brand new Jet Ranger 206B3. We're all checked out in it, and I'm starting to use it on cross-country flights to San Diego County, where we have a lot of work. And I remembered the request of the mechanic, so all of my no-passenger ferry flights were done with both boost pump breakers full. And I never had an engine failure, and everybody was happy. I'm flying it by the book, And so life goes on. So here I am in this Long Ranger with the same basic fuel pump setup, 2 fuel pumps, exactly the same wording in the rotorcraft flight manual, not required until you're 6,000 or above. So I'm probably at the time that my problem occurred at about 2,000 MSL on full autopilot, hands off the controls, sun streaming in through the bubble, and I'm just overjoyed with the smoothness, that beautiful aircraft, and the autopilot flying it so perfectly, pitch, roll, and yaw. Traffic below me, well below me, I'm over the road, way up high, congestion on both sides. And suddenly, without the slightest warning, a banging, severe banging began right above my head. It was as though a very strong person with a huge sledgehammer was up on top of the aircraft going bang, 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 like that. The noise was above the threshold of pain. I was certain at that moment a piece of helicopter would be flying off. I had no idea what was going on. The vibration was severe. Look at the instrument panel, it is nothing but a blur. You can't read anything. I had no idea what was going on. But I knew the engine hadn't failed because there was absolutely no yaw at the time the banging began. No yaw at all. The aircraft continued like it was brand new off the factory floor. I put all this together with my years of experience and could not decide what the problem was, but I knew the helicopter was in the process of destroying itself. The noise level from the banging right above my head was at the threshold of pain. And I was with zero ideas of what was happening. If I'd had to make an auto-rotation, I wouldn't be here to make this video for you, because there was no place to go and no way to get there. And the highway down below, totally congested. You don't want to, just imagine what News at 11 would report on this accident. But the helicopter was fine. It just flew perfectly. It didn't change pitch, roll, or yaw a bit. It was perfect. And here I am, supposedly knowledgeable about autos and engine failures and all that, having been through lots of stuff in years of flying, and I had zero idea what was happening. So we're right over the highway, and up ahead, half a mile away, I look up, and there's Interstate 15, going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Traffic, I can see traffic. I'm going to be crossing over it, and on the other side of the interstate was a huge transmission line with 200,000+ volts coming from Hoover Dam into the Los Angeles area. I was lower than the top of the tower's static wire. I could see that. All this is happening during the last quarter of a mile as I'm approaching the interstate. Everything is still perfect, perfect. As I watched I had nothing, no reason to get on the controls because the aircraft was flying perfectly. The engine hadn't failed, obviously, because there was no yaw. As I'm crossing the interstate, the aircraft is descending because the rotor blades are slowing down. I can see a blade go by, backlit by the sun. I was stunned. What does this mean? And I'm crossing over 6 lanes, 3 or 4 in both directions. Heavy, big trucks, buses, cars. I'm crossing right over the top of them, descending, straight east, same, no change in flight path, in direction. Just just cleared a big truck in the right-hand lane, northbound, when the aircraft started turning to the left. I didn't start it. It's turning to the left. The rotor blades are going swish, 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 swish. They're slowing down. A retreating blade stall caused the retreating blade on the left side, the blades, to start stalling, producing a left turn. I am still doing nothing on the controls. The aircraft makes a perfect landing right inside of an area between the power lines and the freeway. Just short grass and weeds and cows. I couldn't believe it. At that point, I'm hearing, now that the banging has stopped, I'm hearing the engine out horn blowing. The engine had failed, but there was no clue to me that the engine had failed because there was no yaw at all, nothing. And again, the panel would have reported various things had you been able to read it, but it was shaking so badly that it was impossible to read any instrument on the panel to figure out what's going on. I sat there with the rotor blades slowing down, engine out, horn blowing, and I never get headaches until that moment. I do not get headaches, but at that point, all the headaches in the world suddenly appeared in my head. I sat there, was unable to do anything physical. I was just a vegetable. I pulled the circuit breakers to shut off the engine warning horn, shut everything down, and just sat there with a headache. Like I said, I never got headaches, but I had a headache at that point. I was not airworthy. I must have sat there for 10 minutes. The rotor blades, of course, came to a stop. Traffic right next to me on the other side of this barbed wire fence that kept the cows off the freeway. Traffic just kept on going. I'm just sitting there watching the blades slow down. They get stopped. My headache is blowing the top of my head off. And I thought, you know, Pete, you didn't cool down the engine. So I found the energy to restart the engine and sat there at idle for probably 10 minutes, getting rid of the headache and just figuring out what to do next. Rialto Airport is on the other side of the power lines about a mile away. I've got to get there. So I started the engine and sat there another 10 minutes at least while the engine's at idle and my headache is disappearing slowly. Finally, I felt that I was capable of flying safely enough to get to the airport, but I didn't know why the engine quit. I was completely ignorant of everything I'd ever learned about emergency procedures. Nothing fit. I lifted the Long Ranger off the ground very gently, hovered, tried a little power, a little more power, all is very smooth. The panel is readable now. There's no shaking, no banging, no vibration. Kept going until I was able to get higher than the tower line, which is right there. I've got to go across southeast bound to the airport. And I reached a point where I had enough altitude above ground and courage to initiate forward flight and proceed to the airport. So, of course, after cooling down, shutting down, I walked into the director of maintenance office, who was a former Vietnam Huey pilot and an absolutely top guy to run the shop with all these mechanics. I think everyone had been in Vietnam. And I sat in his office, and he listened carefully to my story. And he mentioned a few strong words. And he went out in the shop and called for two of his best mechanics. You guys take your ladders and go out and find out what's broken on the Long Ranger. They did. I disappeared and went up to the director of operations office, the famous Dorcey Wingo, director of operations, and I sat in his office and explained what happened, and he was totally silent. While I'm relating the story, here comes the director of maintenance to report everything's perfect on the aircraft. Nothing's broken. It's all there. No sign of damage, no sign of missing pieces. Are you sure this happened, Pete? Type thing, you know. So here I am with no explanation, nothing. And my boss, Dorcey, after listening to the story, has just said to me, take this long range, take it to 10,000 feet above this airport, and be sure you're talking to Ontario Approach while you're doing this, because you're going through layers of airline traffic. If you can get to 10,000 feet with no engine failure, bring it home, because I've got an air taxi flight at 1400, and I won't do it unless you make this test flight. Okay, all right. Fueled up the aircraft, climbed in it. Off I go over the Alto, Ontario Approach, clears me to continue climbing, and I go until I see 10 plus on the altimeter. Everything's perfect. I bring it back down, land it, fueled it for Dorcey's flight, and tried to forget the events of the day, but I'm deeply troubled because something happened, something catastrophic happened. I can't believe the aircraft didn't disintegrate from the banging. I knew something was going to fly off, and it's happening right here, right above my head. Almost a month goes by. We are a Bell Service Center, and our director of maintenance, Bill Dvorak, walks up to my office and throws a manila envelope on my desk from Bell Helicopter. Now remember, we are a service center. And the Bell Helicopter Service Center had printed, what would it be called, an emergency document sent to all owners of this particular group of long rangers. They had it by serial number, and we had one of them, saying, until we get you the new check valves or whatever, there were two components in the fuel system that were defective, but they didn't show up if the boost pumps were operating. Turn the boost pumps off at any altitude, and you're looking at an engine failure. So this is a big warning. Tell your pilots, don't turn the boost pumps off in flight for any reason, because you may have an engine failure. But we got the bulletin, the service note, almost 4 weeks after the event. Okay, so what was happening? So the engine did quit. Why didn't I know it? Come on, I've got thousands of hours. I've got all kinds of experience. Not the best pilot in the world, but I'm an active, working pilot every day, flying anything that has rotor blades. This situation was because the engine did fail. Rotor RPM did start coming down. The minute it left 100% on the rotor tack, the automatic transmission mount, the beautiful part of the Long Ranger series, the automatic transmission mount was now trying to isolate vibration that it was not tuned for. It was just as though you didn't have any mount. Worse than that, the transmission is now floating. Normally it's floating, bouncing at a 2 per rev frequency, and the vibration is absorbed by the automatic transmission mount. A wonderful device. Credit to Bell. So the transmission and shaft and rotor can vibrate within the confines of the automatic mount. But the minute the frequency changes, now the transmission mount might as well not be there, and the vibration is being transmitted directly to the airframe right above the pilot's head. So that's what caused the problem. In all my years of flying, I cannot recall a single event, and I've had plenty of them, that approached the total zero understanding of what was happening. Thank you for listening to the story. You're looking at a pilot with a lot of experience that was totally at zero in trying to figure out what was going on in what could have easily been the last flight I ever made, and I would have taken who knows who with me in terms of traffic on the freeway and on the road I was over. That's the story. I've kept this to myself for decades, and I've been encouraged to share it while I still remember the details. Thank you very much. I've landed in an area where there are cows grazing, and I can still remember the cows looking up, chewing, with a "what are you doing here" look on their face.